All right, it's all yours.
I think I'm going to call this June 25th, 2024 special open work session virtual meeting to order. First bit of business is I like to move to amend the agenda to remove voting on the to remove the budget vote from the agenda.
Second.
Sorry. All in favor?
Mhm.
Aye.
Can someone start over? Because is someone taking notes?
Uh, we just started. Can you?
So who? So what time? Oh, you got a cat? Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Kat. Any opposed? Oh, I just moved, Linda. I just moved to remove the budget vote from the agenda. And thus far, I think everybody said aye, but I don't believe you voted.
I couldn't get my mute button off. I
Okay. All right. So, do you have are you opposed or do you care, Linda? Your mute's on.
I'm sorry. I don't oppose. I mean, I oppose. So
Oh.
you guys can move forward. We can move it.
Okay. All right. Great.
I'm an abstain.
Oh,
I
you
didn't
are?
vote aye.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, so then the next item we've got is the budget review by Chris Hoser. Do we have the budget?
We do. Thank you, everybody, and good evening. Give me just a second to get all my various windows where they need to be. Okay. All right, so a lot of this is replication from last week's budget workshop, so I won't read this to you, but here are our district budget priorities and those things that we kept in mind as we proceeded through the process. So some things that have happened since last Thursday. We did take another hard look at the budget. We did evaluate for additional cuts. We did make a decision, consulted with another school district. We've decided to extend the teacher MacBook refresh cycle from 4 years to 5 years, thus netting us with the 4-year Apple Care agreement, $73,000 in this year. I feel like this is something that I think this is a good move. I think we can make this work, and it's an extraordinary savings in just this 1 year. Of course, it's really just a deferment, so it just kicks everything down. So this is a one-time savings. This $73,000 will come back next year as we replace the teacher laptops then. We've decided to defer the kindergarten Chromebooks. Those are the touchscreen Chromebooks I've been talking about in the previous meetings. Along with the carts to house those, we were doing about half of the grade at $29,000. I feel like we can create a more solid plan for utilization of those Chromebooks, and we'll spend the time this year developing that plan and getting a clear vision on what those will look like in the kindergarten classrooms. I removed the SSD portion of the multi-tiered systems of support, salary, and benefits. You see the number there before you. The reason why it's only 50%, SSD does contribute $100,000 to salary and benefits for this position. However, we bill them in February after that first pay, which is halfway through the year, and then we'll bill them again into this week actually. But we won't get that check until well into June, potentially even August. I know that they're a little bit short-staffed over there too in their business office. So this way we'll remain whole over the course of the year, and we'll just be half. So we'll be behind half every year. So budgeting half makes sense to me. We did go through and clip a little bit more of selected professional development to the tune of $12,000. And Mr. Estrada and I had a conversation today and decided we would reduce the homeless transportation account from the 90,000 current to 20,000. That's closer to the actual. This is a bit of a wild card. We never know exactly how this is going to land, but we'll move forward anticipating that we won't exceed that $70,000 on outlay for transporting those kids in this situation. Here's just another look at the property tax rates. Again, I don't have any further information than I did last Thursday. Here's our total revenue. No changes here. Here's the breakdown by source. Budgeted expenditures. All right, so getting down to the brass tacks of it, these numbers have been adjusted to reflect the changes. Salaries remained at 7%. We were able to reduce through some additional changes to position control and some additional modifications in there to make sure things were being allocated correctly. I did mention last Thursday that I'd be taking another hard look at that. So this is the result of that. It's a bit of a decrease there. Purchase services is at 9%, supplies at 7%, and capital projects is a reduction of 56.5%, 56.6%, which is a bit different than it was last week as well. These are the projects. These have not changed. These are still important. Okay, here's where we land today. As a result of the changes that I've discussed previously, I believe last week we were at like 26.5. We've been able to increase the fund balance percentage from that to the 27.2. Where do we go from here? We will make any revenue and expenditure adjustments if new information becomes available. I don't expect that. This is something that I probably should mention. We are still awaiting our reimbursement check from our insurance claims over the past couple of years. I do expect that this week. However, the mail did not arrive today as our courier is a little bit in transition. So I'm hopeful that the mail will arrive tomorrow. If not, I'll go to the post office myself and get it. As we won't be approving, a number of these things are now moot as far as immediate next steps, but these will still remain the next steps once that budget is finally approved. Then we're going to look between now and ongoing, examine the potential revenue due to expiring TIFs. I know that the Cambridge Commons, which is on the site of the old Bruce Elementary School, did expire this past last month, I believe that was. It may have been April or May. The Maplewood City Council voted to close that TIF. So those things, once they are on the tax rolls, we'll be able to take advantage of that. So we need to do some calculating there. I'd like to explore what a no tax increase bond issue would look like and which large projects it could fund. We have a statutory limitation to how much debt we can hold at any given point in time. I know that we do have some room. We pay off anywhere from $4.5 million per year in debt. So as that decreases our assessed value increases, our debt capacity also increases. And then started running some of those initial calculations for what an operating tax levy increase might look like to sustain us, considering where we're at right now on the downward trend of our fund balance. Dr. Jamison, I should give you the opportunity to make any comments if you have any.
At this time, we're continuing to look at some of the considerations for implementation for the next fiscal year, but at this time, we welcome any questions you may have.
Chris, I got a quick question, and forgive me if it's in there. I'm not the most fluent with the budgeting. I'm still kind of learning about the different funds. So taking a step back and looking at the overall picture, I know that some of it we're kind of estimating or anticipating certain funds, but I'm just curious, like what the projection of the total revenue is versus the total deficit or expenditures for the school year. Like, does that make sense? Kind of what I'm asking?
I think so. I can show you that. My transitions are moving extraordinarily slow. It's probably because I have 32 tabs open. Okay, so looking at this schedule here, this is just operating funds. So this is net of debt service and bond funds and those lease participation certificates or COPs or whatever you'd like to call them. So if you look here under 25, I should have probably highlighted this column in green for you. Right now, we're projecting operating revenues to be right around 27.4 million. Expenditures at 29.5, which leaves a deficit of right around 2.1.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Is this the time when you want to talk about items in your main budget document, the 117-page document, or do you want to talk about that later?
Well, it depends. It is a 117-page document, and there's thousands of cells of numbers in there. So I'm happy to take a stab at it. Some of those things I might want to research before I answer completely, but
Well, before we do that, I thought, and maybe I'm mistaken, but I thought that we were going to get a copy of that document. Is it possible that you could actually send the revised 100 and whatever page document to us? So
it's attached to the agenda.
It's on the
Which one is
it was just posted to the agenda about 30 minutes ago.
You can't hear
Oh.
Brian. Yeah.
So wait, which one is it?
I'll send it out, Josh. Give me 1 second. I'll pull it down and email it out to the group.
All right, thank you.
So, I mean, essentially my questions are going to be, what other things can we look at for budget reductions? Since I'm not hopeful about going for a tax levy in the next year. And while I do appreciate where the extra work you've done to get it closer to a $2 million deficit than where we were last week at about $2.5 million, I think we could do better. And I'm hoping we could talk about some possibilities there. Primarily, it's going to have to be in the areas of positions, salary reductions.
So we did include in the last board meeting the potential considerations, but also included in that information what the impact.
You're breaking up there, Benita.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Before we get into that, actually, just for full disclosure, we're planning on having another meeting with an executive session where we could talk specifically about positions and ways to reduce the budget based on those positions. I'm kind of wary about talking about specific positions in an open meeting because it might kind of fall within personnel matters, but that is something that I've thought about. And I know that I've talked to Dr. Jameson, and I think that some of your concerns can be addressed in that executive session at our next meeting, if that's okay.
Okay, when you say the next meeting, you mean in July, or do you mean?
No, we have to
potentially
meet
one still
before,
this
we
week?
have to meet before July to approve the budget.
Okay.
So our next meeting, be it tomorrow, be it Thursday, Friday, one of those days.
So to answer your question, Brian, I do think we presented and shared some possibilities around where potential cuts could come and how to get to closer to the $2 million deficit that we're spending, but also thinking about the impact of morale and doing that in July. And so we're talking about teaching positions, which I think included that. There were also some other positions that were highlighted in considerations that was presented to the board. And then also in the board note, there was a more extensive document that included additional information for the board to review for consideration. So I think we did explore those things, but if we're talking about culture and making those cuts at this time, the impact on staff morale, but we can discuss if there are ideas that you have, but as Josh indicated, if it's a personnel matter or someone specifically you want to talk about, we wouldn't be able to talk about that in open session.
Yeah, it's up to, it doesn't matter to me whether we do it in executive session today or tomorrow, but I think we need to take a careful look at administrative office positions. That would be the area. I'm not looking for teacher position cuts. I think there's room for other things. That's all.
I said, and
Well,
I
I think
think
that, yeah, I'm sorry, go on.
I guess it would be helpful, and I think if you could provide me what you're thinking so that I am able to prepare to say where I think the impact would be. So while it may be something that's more germane to a dollar amount that you're envisioning, we also have to think about the ability to continue to function the district and carry out the varying aspects that are required by the department.
Sure, I understand that. Would you like those suggestions now? You said you want to hear them. Do you want those now, or?
Is it possible that you could email them to her, please?
Or you can drop them in the document that I previously shared where it said.
I really would. To me, it's not. These are conversation items. I'm not saying let's cut X positions. I want to do a review of multiple positions. So I'm not trying to. I don't want to do it through email and back and forth. I'd like to have an open discussion. Executive session.
No.
May be
We were going to have an open discussion in executive session, but she needs time to say like why a certain position is important versus why it's not important. Be able to compare salary. Oh, well, believe it or not, this is something that we have talked about. You know you know, we need to look at not only just the dollar value of what the position is, but also what that gets us, whether or not it's comparable to other districts, whether or not, you know, some like what does it mean to eliminate a position? Like what does it mean for the rest of the staff, that kind of thing?
Right. I think what I think the if I can speak at a 30,000 foot level, we are within 4 years of being bankrupt. I would say we need to pivot towards an austerity budget mentality. And that means everything is on the table for trimming. And I just don't know if that's currently the mentality shared by everybody on the board. That's why I want to have a conversation about that. I understand I could very well be a minority voice on that.
Well, I can't speak for my colleagues. I can speak for myself and say that that is something that I too have expressed some concerns about certain expenditures. But again, I think that the specifics of that are probably better suited for executive session.
That's fine.
So Brian, just to clarify, I'm not saying I want to do something via email. What I am asking, because I am certain that you have specific positions that you're referencing. And if you're talking about specific positions cutting, it is not prudent for us to do that and talk about people who don't know that you're referencing their positions being cut. I care about people. So what I am asking is if you can
Same here.
positions in there, I am able to tell you what positions are positions that I think would be ones that will continue to allow us to function as a district, because there are some responsibilities that you may not necessarily be aware of that those individuals do that are in alignment to what DESE requires or what we need to have happen. So right now, you're asking for an open discussion, which I am very open to having, but not about people and their individual positions. So I was asking that to be allowed an opportunity to be able to prepare, to have some discussions. And while, you know, you have specific positions that you may have in mind for cutting, there are other ways to be lean in the budget that we can bring forward. It really is more or less around what it is that we actually want to focus in on to try to get to that point, and what other options might I bring forward for that. It is also my responsibility to ensure that programming still occurs based on the quality of education, because we listed a number of things we can save if we were to make recommendations for other things, it will impact programming too. So I do think it's a both and. I don't think that it's prudent for us to discuss specifically personnel matters. If you can either email me or drop it in, I'm not going to respond. I just need to know what you're thinking. And that was my initial ask earlier today when I was saying, you know, what are those ideas so I can begin to think about the position, the impact, and the rationale for such. So that will be helpful for me to bring forth a recommendation that the board can vote on.
So, oh, sorry, Brian, did you have more on that?
No, but maybe based on what you're saying, Benita, then the target for me is still a $2 million more of reductions.
But that,
And I know that seems surprising or unreasonable or probably pretty far out there. But that's the target for me. I understand we're not going to probably get all the way to that point, but that is, you're asking about the target, and that's the target.
is that the will of the full board? So that's my ask, and that was the
Yeah,
ask in the email.
exactly.
But for one board member. So if the full board is asking for administration to bring a zero budget with no deficits in, then the full board has to make that request.
Right.
It's
Right.
Brian's request. And at this time, I do not feel like it's prudent for administration to bring a budget and to be able to offer and run programming to ensure that we can sustain the quality of education and the experiences that we're providing our students and our staff, because that would also include cutting professional development in some of the other areas. So the how we get there is what administration develops. And while you can offer feedback that could either be in alignment with the board's directive, it is the administration's responsibility to bring a budget that the board, the full board, can actually support and approve. So right now we're missing a board member, but I have not received any communication from the full board saying that we are looking to bring a budget with $2 million of additional cuts. So right now that's your ask, and in preparation.
That's my ask. Yes, that's my ask. But I do think I made that ask in May, and we've gotten 500,000 of that 2.5 million. So I do feel like, I thought the rest of the board was maybe moderately supportive of at least trying at the May meeting, but we didn't take a vote on it. But maybe we do need to take a vote on the current 2 million, and then we'll see what the board's will is.
To take a vote. The budget, in order to have the budget, the administration would have to bring a budget with $2 million in deficit cuts. And so you don't have to vote. That would have been something that was included in the directive that was approved by the board. And while you as an individual board member, Brian, indicated that you wanted to see additional cuts, which we have worked diligently to do, the full board has not expressed that they wanted to see a budget.
Right.
$1 million worth of cuts. So
I understand
what you're saying. I am respecting what your ask is, but the collective board has to say that they are looking for a $2 million cut. I'm sorry, Jenny, I do see your hand.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to, I wanted to share my position. So I understand this is what I'm seeing, is that we have a situation where revenues are pretty much stagnant, right? We don't even anticipate really revenues going up. Our spending is increasing. And while I understand we are in an unfortunate situation in Missouri with the Hancock Amendment, right, where we aren't able to take the full value of those assessment increases. So we're sort of strapped. But I'm not comfortable right now with a budget, passing a budget that, while I understand we're getting to the point where we're right at a percentage of fund balance that is about where we want to be, without some sort of plan for maybe some further cuts that get us closer. I don't think it's realistic to get the full 2 million without there being a drastic change to our district. And I don't think that's really possible. But for me, I want to show our community that we are doing everything we can to get there so that when we do have to ask them for money, they will know we have tried to trim where we could. And I guess, one as I brought up in my memo I sent the other night was purchase services, right? And I know that's a big category. But what I noticed is that from fiscal year 19 to this, that has increased $1.6 million, right? So it started at but from fiscal year 14 to 19, it only increased $442,000. So for me, that is a huge bucket. And I guess what I'm trying to understand is what is that? And if that is going to continue to grow out of control like that, like how can we ever plan for that? So I understand it's a big bucket, but do we have any idea why it grew so much in the last few years?
I think
Cost of
Chris,
goods, COVID, I think all of those things.
But COVID, we're spending on COVID, or it's things
No,
that we purchased with COVID
okay, what happened
funds?
so like if you recall, during COVID, a lot of companies raised their prices because of lack of supply, demand, that kind of thing. Once the supply increased, they weren't going to lower their bottom line. So it's a matter of 2014 money is not the same as 2024 money.
I get that, but the rate at which it grew seems larger than what even accounts for that. And so I guess my question is, what are we buying more of? And it's hard to tell because it's not broken out. Like, how much are we spending on consulting? How much are we, that's the kind of stuff I think I can't tell. I'm just getting the biggest increase, honestly, in that year is other purchase service. So what kind of things, I guess, fall within other purchase service?
I can have Chris to answer that one. And we did drop in responses to the questions to the memo that you sent, and actually, as you're aware, pushed it back out. Chris, can you give an overview of what's included in purchase services, as well as where the increases occurred?
For the most part,
sorry.
For the most part, the purchase services, a large number of them, I'd have to do some sorting and filtering here, but we do have quite a bit that are related to the CBE grant, and also, candidly, not a ton of professional development happened in this current year due to just the budgeting process last year. We had quite a few new principals. Moving into this, they did not budget a whole lot. They weren't comfortable doing so. The budgets were already locked in by the time they got here. So we're, in a sense, right-sizing those training opportunities for our teachers. You've heard us talk about literacy. You've heard us talk about math. You've heard us talk about those other areas that our folks need additional support in to help educate our students. And these are those experiences. So
I would also say, Jenny, if you think about COVID, the opportunities for in-person professional development really weren't there. And with principals and the way that we did budgeting this year, principals did communicate with teachers regarding their professional development opportunities. And I think one of the things that you had mentioned in your effort for gaining your seat on the board is that was a part of the concern that some of the teachers brought forward, is that they had identified professional development opportunities, I guess, previously, and they were not given an opportunity to attend. But the other piece is our strategic plan includes areas where staff have not been trained. So Chris talked about the CBE grant, which the $400,000 is included, which would show the increase in purchase services for those individuals who will have access to those opportunities. But if we're saying that we're introducing something new, we also have to provide professional development for that. The same would be said for the new science resource, the purchase service would be included in there too. So those are, while not explicitly called out in the budget that you're looking at, it's things that are being identified to support the strategic plan or an initiative that is being brought forward that aligns to varying areas of MSIP 6 that we need to focus in on, or other areas if we're talking about accreditation. So as Chris mentioned, literacy is one of those. So we have purchases for, I think, foundations and professional development associated with that. All of the stuff that's identified, especially with the new budgeting process, if it's not directly aligned to the strategic plan, those requests for professional development aren't being approved for that. And so I think over time, and depending on where some of these things are, so just to give you an example, Jenny and Chris, I don't remember which one, but one of the conferences is a Fed Pro conference that's required by the federal programs coordinator to go to. Well, this conference typically is held closer. Well, now I think it's in DC or somewhere else. And so we have to pay for travel, pay for some of those pieces that are coming out of that in any professional development or any support that's being brought back into the district. So it's not anything outside of the scope of the areas that support the strategic plan.
And I get that. And I think to go back to the campaign and professional development, I guess what you've told me is that there was money there. People were just being turned down for it. So my question is, how much more are we then spending besides that grant? Because the grant will go away. So besides the grant, you're saying this large increase is professional development, I guess is what I'm hearing. And I get how it all works, how the travel and all that, but like, how much are we spending? Because I see, like, for instance, per other purchase services, if you're saying that's where professional development falls, increased from fiscal year 19 from 55,387 to 860,000. So like if that's maybe where the grant is, I get that, but then there's still, so these are just the questions. Like if we are trimming further, it just seems like that is a large bucket. And I know I could tell you trimmed some in purchase services since the budget last Thursday. Do you know about how much of a percentage? I haven't had time to process the new budget. Do we have an idea of sort of how much further we trimmed that bucket?
Bring that information back at the,
Okay.
or send that out. And would it be helpful for you to see what's being allocated in the purchase services in the alignment to the strategic plan?
I think just seeing what's included in that, I think would be helpful if it's easy to provide just sort of a snapshot of your like an Excel spreadsheet with them on it. I you don't have to show me how it aligns the plan, like I can, but I'm confused. Like, it's just such a huge amount of money. And I guess if we're looking to cut, it seems like a good place to look. I will stop so other people have a chance.
I agree. I think, Jenny, that I would like to see a list of that stuff too. I agree with you.
We'll make sure that we send some of those items out so you get an idea of what's included in purchase services.
I will send a list of all the things that I would like to have a look at and consider for cuts.
I did already send a document. So Trent, if you can drop those things in, I would say that I would be more interested in the questions per se, because Chris and I will sit down to look at what we know needs to happen to close the gap, because you may say X, and because we're on the ground doing the operational things, I may not necessarily agree that something that you're putting in is an area where you cut. And so what's helpful for me as I work with Chris is to see what questions that you have around what's currently budgeted. And then as we work towards continuing to examine where we might be able to cut, I'm able to bring that forward. So
I'll send you a list and I'll let the board administration decide what we're going to discuss.
Can you clarify what you mean by that? Because I'm
going to let Jenny and Josh decide whether or not we're going to discuss it.
I'm lacking clarity there. I think from the standpoint of them being in, I guess I don't understand your ask, because what I'm assuming will happen based on the questions that I'm writing down and what I'm hearing from the board members, Chris and I will meet again. We'll look to see where additional adjustments can be made. We will answer any questions that are sent forward, provide the information as it relates to purchase service.
I need to review what you've sent. I only got it about 20 minutes ago. So I will write down those things that I think we should take a look at to consider cuts. And I'll let Jenny and Josh decide whether or not we're going to talk about it as a board.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Because we sent a list of, in the special edition of the board note that was sent on June 7th, and we gave a very detailed list of all the areas that potential cuts could be made. So that was from administrative positions, that included teachers, programming. And so, being clear, I'm fine with when I meet with Jenny and Josh to discuss what cuts and what we feel that we need to discuss. But again, it's my responsibility to bring forth a budget based on the parameters that are being provided. So when I meet with Josh and Jenny to talk about all of the things that are sent, trends that I see, and the questions that are being asked, and Chris and I coming back to develop that, I guess it would be helpful if collectively the items that we sent already could be reviewed and then giving feedback based on those, because I'm certain that some of the things that you're thinking about are probably included in what we already sent. And so that's all I'm asking. If you can send those questions. I work well with Josh and Jenny. We sit down, and when we have our conversations around what to put on the agenda and what to discuss, I'm just saying your questions are most helpful because it helps me to understand where I need to channel the focus as we look to make additional adjustments. So that's my
Yeah,
ask.
I mean, I think that, just to kind of, add some, just some clarity. And I understand what Trent's saying. I say, go ahead, make the list, send it, if it falls within stuff that we've already talked about, it falls within stuff we've already talked about. But at the same time, I think that having a fresh set of eyes on the document honestly can't hurt, because I know that y'all have been living this document for however long, and it could be that, some of the stuff that he says, or some of the questions that he asks could either spark some other area, but more importantly, what it would do is give us an opportunity to explain why we think certain programs are more expendable than others. I think that I wish we could keep all our programs, but I think that if we are looking at making, and my understanding too is that, just for clarification, this is not going to impact this budget that we were approving, but it is going to have us look forward to what we can do in the future, because it's too late, I think, to do anything this year. But this is about kind of moving forward. What are we going to do before we make an ask of the community? And I certainly don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I also want to be clear that I don't anticipate any large substantial cuts to this budget beyond some of the things that we're discussing at our next meeting. If that makes sense.
Question. I'm sorry, Josh, I didn't mean to cut you off. This is just for my own clarity. So just in general, I don't know if Dr. Jameson, this is a question for you or for Chris, but like I said, this is just more for my own clarity. So when we're talking about budgeting and we're talking about cuts, the cuts are not something that the board is directly responsible for making, correct? It's more of, hey, we want to trim some of the expenses. And so then the administration goes back and they determine what areas get the cuts. Is that correct?
Yes, and so it's our responsibility to look at where the gaps are and to bring forward recommendations, and then also to have considerations on how those budget cuts would either impact programming, would impact teacher morale, our ability to provide the quality of education for kids. And so I think, what I'm trying to get to is it's June and July is around the corner. And when we begin to talk about expending people, there are several dominoes that will have to fall with that. And so I'm going to give you an example. If we were to say, this is an example, which was included. We talked about DESI's requirement with class sizes. We have some class sizes that aren't even at the DESI min. You could feasibly eliminate a section. So let's just say we eliminate a section at a particular grade level. And the person who was in that grade level that we hired, the newest in transition into a position that's like a reading specialist or a math specialist. When we eliminate that position, the person that we moved into the position that was open has to go back into the position that they had before. And so, I think for me, as I think about the pieces, and Trent, please know I'm okay with having your questions. I'm okay with having the discussion. I think it is helpful for me to see the questions so that I can look across the full budget to be able to say, what do we already work through, whether it's staffing from the administration level, from the teacher level, whether it's programming, whether it's looking at all of the things that were either mentioned, because I think one of the things that Brian mentioned during the board onboarding during finance was making reductions to metaphor work. And I was very clear that that is a part of our identity. And I didn't feel comfortable with doing that. But one of the things we brought back was, what would a reduction look like across metaphors, including capstones?
I didn't say anything about metaphor work. I actually, until now, I'm not even sure what you were talking about. So that wasn't me. Might have been somebody else.
During
It's not important.
my point to that is that was an ask, but I clearly remember saying that that was something that I would not bring forward as a cut because it's part of our identity. And Chris shared that too. So, when I think about, Christy, to your question, how we go about looking at the budget and what's going to have the smallest amount of impact on programming and people, because we need to keep the people. But there were some other suggestions in the document that I didn't get any feedback on, that I was saying, here are some things for consideration. So, I'm not trying to give additional work to the board, but when you're able to ask questions and give feedback based on the documents and the considerations that are sent out, it helps me to see where you are thinking about for cuts. And then I can come back and say, that's not doable, but to get to that amount, it is. So that's really why I'm saying that it's helpful to get that, not for any other reason, or not that I'm trying to produce additional work for members of my team to answer questions. It is a means to get me to see where you're thinking additional cuts can be made.
Right.
So
But what I think you're hearing Trent and others, and Jenny and me, maybe others here saying, is that we would be able to refine our list of things to you better if we could have a conversation about things at a general level, either now or tomorrow or whenever. But we're waiting for when there's just an open conversation about these items on the budget.
But they're on there. So the only thing that I asked that we not talk about was specific email that was sent regarding specific positions to be cut, because this is an open meeting. So in that long list of items that we discussed and that I sent out, which I can actually pull up and access, there were things listed on there that did not include specific people. And so if that was an item that we wanted to discuss, if I would have seen or received any feedback on that initial document, I would have been able to say, hey, let's talk about those things. No one even asked for me to bring those items forward. And some of those items we actually did include in the last presentation. So if it would be helpful, I can pull that document up, because there were a list of things that were included in there that would get us to the $2 million faster than eliminating 3 to 4 positions out of a central office administration cabinet.
Well,
Can I
I
ask a
think that-
Can I ask a clarifying question real quick? Is the document you're talking about basically the version B
It's if you remember the
on 6/7/24? It says. I mean, I just clicked on your email and that's what came up. So I don't know if I'm in the right.
Is that Jenny, just for clarity purposes, is that I sent it in the board note.
Is it 6/7/24 board note? And then it says It says, we are still exploring where additional cuts can be made. Click here to see preliminary areas for consideration. Okay, I think my issue, because I think these are the ones that came to us at our last meeting, is that again, I guess my position is probably a little different than Brian's. Like, I'm not looking like, I don't want to wipe out all of seed to table or like home visits or whatever, but are there ways within these that we can trim a little? Maybe it's not getting rid of it all, but we're, I don't know, doing a little, but that's sort of where I'm at. And so that's why in my memo I sent was trying to identify sort of areas, like for me, I guess one question is summer school. Do we, and I didn't have a chance, I know it was answered, but I just got this. So if we could just quickly here, is summer school something that by increasing it from about 50, 60 a couple years ago to 350,000, do we get that money back?
So we can answer that. And, out of fairness, Jenny, I'm just going to ask, like, I know you just got the responses, but we got it on Sunday for the request for the questions. So, I'll
right, because I just got the final budget was
all
given
right.
to
Well,
us last
hold on.
Tuesday.
All right. So this is just hold on one second. Okay. So guys, I mean, I think that the reality is that there isn't much that we can do for this year. I think that the issue is moving forward, looking at ways that we can make those hard looks. And frankly, I mean, the problem is we just do not have time. We do not have time to do any of this. I know all of us have stuff that we have to do during the day, and we haven't had enough time to digest the document to go ahead and be like, all right, well, it says this on line whatever page blah blah blah, I want to reduce X. I think tomorrow we have I think that we should have sufficient time to I want us to have sufficient time to go over this document so that we can make a decision sometime either tomorrow, Wednesday, or Thursday, because it has to be done. During that conversation of before we approve it, during the executive session, we are going to have some of these more difficult conversations about things that we can do. And I think that executive session is probably a better place for a lot of these discussions, because it's not fair to the personnel to say, okay, we want to cut a reading specialist, or we want to cut a this program or an after school program or sports program or whatever, without us having the ability to sort of have a frank discussion in an executive session about what are the pros, what are the cons. So for that reason, I do think that Dr. Jameson's approach of kind of being kind to our people is the appropriate thing to do. So my suggestion would be that we take time to review this document, come back. We have to pick a date to come back this week. And I know a lot of people are, have, I guess, robust schedules that they have to deal with. But again, like I said, it has to be done. So, I think that if we could figure out whether or not it's tomorrow, Thursday, or Friday that we come back, preferably, my preference would be later in the week, to give us more time to review. But I know that that might be more difficult for some people. And again, I want to make this as fair as possible for everybody so that everybody can participate. But again, all we need is a quorum. And it's not fair to the district to hold this up. So
Josh, can
anyway.
I clarify something though? Like,
oh, absolutely. Go for it.
Yeah. So I for me, the last area I always want to go after is people. So like, I think we need to be careful though, that we're not discussing things in a closed session that should be discussed in an open session. Like summer school is not me going after, those are all already staff.
Oh, no.
I'm just saying, like, I think that's why we need to be careful of, yes, if we are specifically discussing staffing, I get that. Like, and I agree because, and this is the thing. That's why for me at this point, staffing would be a last resort because it is June. I do hope going forward, we don't end up in this timing situation. I'm hopeful next year we can have a much earlier schedule to this. So I'm also factoring that in my reality of what we're going to pass. But I agree with you. I'd like to actually digest all the information before feeling like I have the capacity to actually make a decision. So I cannot meet. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just going to ask because I wasn't saying discuss. I was specifically, to your point, I was specifically that personnel. But what my ask would be in regards to the considerations, I'm not saying that those have to be full cuts. It really was an exercise to say, here are the things that we're thinking about. And one of the things that came back was instead of wiping all of the funds for the metaphors, we said if we reduce by 50%, this is what it would look like. So again, the questions and the feedback regarding what we brought forward is not saying let's wipe it all, but it's saying what from your perspective as a board member seems to be an area based on whatever you're seeing from your side, and give me an opportunity to go back and say, no, I don't think this is the place where we want to cut. You know, here's what my recommendation would be for that. So void of not having that, I think that's the piece that I'm saying would be helpful to bring back to the board versus me having to respond to a variety of emails. I have all of those things in one document to say, these are things that yes or no, I think would be helpful. But I'm specifically, when I'm talking about exec session, I am talking about people. I know specifically what can be talked about in exec. And that was my ask. I don't, I care about people. And to have some of those conversations, specifically when at some point, if you're talking about salary or a person, we have wasn't even the full list. We just pulled out some critical pieces that didn't have a very large impact on programming and people. But here's a huge list of things that are included. And if the full board can look at those items, go back to the other document that I included and put either recommendations, questions, that will help Chris and I to be able to go back and think about additional adjustments. That would be very helpful for administration.
Okay. All right. So I think the next real item of business then, I suppose we have a couple of action items that we have to deal with. And that's 310 support staff recommendation, tuition reimbursements.
Could I ask a question? Sorry, back on budget, just for my own clarification, just how stuff works.
Yeah.
Is there typically a budget amendment done at the end of the year? I thought there was to sort of right size everything, or is that just sometimes you have one?
There is. We're going to bring that amendment in July.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
We've conferred with the auditors and we felt like that was the best course of action for where we're at right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to move on to the action items. 3.01 support staff recommendation, tuition reimbursement.
I move to accept the support staff tuition reimbursement as recommended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, the 3.02 warrant list. Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve the warrant list as presented.
Second.
I have a question about this one. Sorry, I'm just confused. So this includes some of the stuff we already voted on at our last meeting, and so is that typical? You just then for that last week, you just add it on and revote.
Which of those things are you?
I mean, it says warrants presented for approval. It says at June 21st meeting, which isn't, but it says for the period of May 7th through June 21st.
I think she was rushing and did not edit the language on that.
Okay, because
well
there
then-
is one check date. This is like 6/3, so I just didn't know if it includes. It looks
there
like
are many checks There are many checks with dates prior to those listed in there.
that I think we voted on last time. So
Okay,
I just didn't know if that's how you do it or no.
Can we, all right, so, yeah, can we make sure that this is right before we vote on it?
She posted everything.
I mean, almost the entire visa statement section includes items from May and early June.
And let's just consider this an accumulation, and you are not double approving things. You are
I don't know what that means.
It's just hard to tell what's new.
Could this maybe we move to table this motion until maybe tomorrow or whatever the next meeting is, and we can
Yeah, that's a good
reapprove.
idea.
The motion
So
to
I'll make a
table.
motion to table this vote. You just
Second.
need a second, and then we have to have a vote.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Okay, now, as far as our next meeting, you know, when are y'all available? I know that Linda is going to be traveling. Katie will be available. I will be available. I don't know about Christy.
Yeah, I should be available.
I am generally available till Friday at about 1 or 2.
Okay.
I do have CLE all day tomorrow because I gotta catch up. But so tomorrow night's not the best, but if that's the only time that works for everyone, I can just make it work.
Okay.
Tomorrow night is unfortunately tomorrow or Saturday would be the only 2 days. Saturday would have to be late afternoon.
I'm not.
Okay.
I'd prefer to do evening if I can, because there are some days that I'll have some things I have to do, but so ideally, if everybody could do an evening, if not, I can see if I can make some adjustment.
I think tomorrow evening is probably the time that we can do it. That's sort of most conducive to everybody.
About what time you guys thinking about tomorrow?
I think the same time.
Unless there's
Or
a
how
time that
about-
works better for you, Linda.
Well, I'm thinking, I should be able to 6:30, 6:37 probably be fine with me.
Well, how about 7 then?
Yeah, let's do 7. I should be able, I'll be in Memphis by then and checked in the hotel.
Okay. All right. So how about 7?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So
And you'll plan an executive session at the end of it for discussion
Yeah.
of. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, should we do the executive session beforehand if we're discussing like potential
Yeah.
that might be
changes in
that
the?
might be actually a really good idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we're gonna
Yeah.
move to that anyway.
Yeah. So why don't we do that an executive session to start at 7, and then the regular board meeting to start at 8. Is that going to give us enough time?
Maybe 7:30.
Is that enough time for the notice provision? Do you have to have a certain number of hours of notice?
I was actually waiting to kind of interject
Jack
that.
that.
Yeah, I think, and then we also have the internet will be out district. I think a planned outage tomorrow is scheduled as
All
well.
right. So tomorrow does not work. Okay. So how much time do we actually need before we can have this meeting?
So we have to post 24 hours would actually have to be like posted. So
If we got it done on Saturday, can we just do it Saturday?
I can do Saturday afternoon, evening.
I know that is the day, but
I think Chris is.
Well, among my concerns is that there is a time factor involved in these things that you're asking for. And
Yeah.
if you would, And I'm not sure that there's a way for me to completely describe what that looks like. But in addition to the 300 plus hours we've already spent on this budget and the multiple hours it'll take to re-review, make the changes, understand the impact, consider the impact. And then if we bring that and then you decide for more changes, then there's really no place to maneuver. We're out of room.
All right. So what about,
If
okay,
you
so
ask us
it's
to drop $1
Thursday.
million at the next meeting and then are trying to approve it in that very same meeting, I'm just not sure how that works.
All right, well, what
Chris, I'm
about,
glad you said that.
okay, so what about Thursday then? Can we just do, is Thursday enough time? Does that give us enough time to post?
So Thursday works if, and you know, my ask would be the ask that I asked before, if the board could go back to the original document that's included in the board note. And then there are 2 links there and just drop in questions or items that are of interest that we put for consideration. And then that will, if you do that prior to the Thursday meeting, that will give Chris and I enough time to actually go back in to look at where additional cuts can be made. So
Also,
that
our audit begins tomorrow. That probably ought to be said as well.
lots of,
So, yeah.
so
So I agree. Okay.
I just think it would be helpful. So if today is Tuesday. If we can at least minimally get whatever changes or recommendations based on the document you reviewed by noon tomorrow, that will give Chris and I a good chunk of time to sit down, get something back out to you so that you have something to review prior to the meeting on Thursday. If you would like to send me your staffing questions and not put it in the doc because other people have access to that, please do that, because then that will allow me to prepare responses for us to discuss during exec session. Because what I don't want to have happen is that something is included and I say I'm not prepared to actually respond to the information that's being provided. So I would also like some time to be able to prep and bring some information forward. So that will be my ask as we work to get this thing across the finish line based on the date that we are required to have the budget approved.
Well, again, Josh, I had emailed you earlier, you know, in your request about when else to meet, but Thursday and Friday are just absolutely out. I'm booked up the entire
Right.
day. So
I don't know what
just-
choice I have though. I mean, that's the problem. We have to do it within 24 hours and it has to get done.
Sure.
You know, that's
So
that's
as
the
long
problem.
as there's a quorum, that's what matters.
I know. And I
And,
mean, ideally, I would
I
like
mean, everybody's voice
involved in
matters.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's voice
And
matters.
if you want to send me,
Um,
Brian, if you want to send me what your concerns are, I can also have a conversation with,
Sure.
send me what you want asked, and then I'll ask it.
Okay.
All right, same thing. I know that-
Thursday at the same time, 7.
What
or-
happens if we don't pass the budget?
we get dinged.
What is the consequence?
Yeah.
Do you get lose points on season?
Chris, can you respond to what the challenges are when the budget is not approved?
Well, there's a number of challenges. Number one, we have bills to pay, we have orders to make. If we wait too long, we won't be prepared for school. We're already getting pretty late on some of the items that need to be ordered. We have work that needs to start as far as repairs and things of that nature. I'll need to look in the manual to see what the statutory requirements are before. I don't want to speak on that without reading it.
And we can send that back out. There are some requirements there. We can send that back out as well for the board to review. And that's an easy one. We can send that out early. I do think it's possible for us to get there. I think the things that I'm requesting will help expedite that. Brian, if there are items, like I said, I'm very mindful about, you know, how I'm addressing people. And so if there are things about specific positions that, whether you want to send it to me and Josh, so that way, or if you want to jump on a three-way call or a Zoom with me and Josh to kind of talk through some of the things you're considering. While I may not necessarily agree with some of the things you bring forward, I may have an alternative to getting to the end, because really the end is, it sounds like additional reductions are being requested. And how we get there is the responsibility of the administration. So if it's looking for another $1 million, it is the administration's responsibility to identify areas where we can get that without losing a lot of traction in other areas. So I think if you are able to provide that to me, I can probably give a little bit more context in regards to the best way forward for that.
So we can pass a budget and amend it later, correct?
Yes.
All right.
But I think if you're talking about people, Trent, to your question, because I think Brian's was specific to people, that one would probably be the most challenging. And that's why I was saying that if he could give me what he is looking at, I could probably come up with some alternatives to get to the bottom line around, staffing or questions, because he may list something that I may not necessarily agree with based on what I see happening on the ground level. So I think whatever he provides me will give me additional context. Right now, I don't have what he's referencing, so that would be most helpful.
And if you're free tomorrow, Brian, if you want to email me some times, we can triangulate with Dr. Jameson, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay. All right. With that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Hang on, Josh, one quick question. I may have missed it here. The next meeting is Thursday, right? It's at 6:30, is that right? Okay.
We're doing, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
6:30, not 7. Linda,
yeah.
does that work for you?
Thursday, I have to see, I think, because tomorrow's like my free day, it's everybody's free day, but Thursday and Friday is when we're in back-to-back conference. But if it's at 7 o'clock, I'm going to make sure if I don't have to attend like any dinner, if it's not mandatory for me to attend. But I'll let you guys know by email tomorrow.
Okay. Well, do you want to put it at 7 just in case? Why don't we just put it at 7 just in case, like you need that cushion?
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Motion to
Okay.
adjourn. Oh, sorry.
No, go on.